All right. Hey, everybody. I was going to say welcome to Social Selling for Newbies, but this isn't Social Selling for
This
Newbies.
isn't social selling for newbies, but
But you
you may
probably
recognize
know,
it from
that's
social
right.
selling.
You probably know us from Social Selling for Newbies. I'm Brandon Lee, and this is Tom Burton. And we put this together because there's been so many questions, so many conversations about what the heck is modern selling. And as we have developed the community for Modern Seller HQ, which this might be where you're watching it, and as we've spoken with people from Tom with your company Lead Smart, with my company Fist Bump, and the consulting work that we do, it just comes up over and over and over again. Like, what exactly is modern seller? And so we took it upon ourselves to define it and explain what it is and why it is so important. Did I set that up right, Tom?
I can't add any more to it, but
I did it right.
I know this isn't social selling for newbies, but I do feel like we should somehow start all this with a dad joke just to kind of get everything on the right foot. We don't
I
have Burton
appreciate
here
that.
to give us the chat GPT competitor,
Yes.
so you've got the floor entirely to
I
yourself.
got the floor. So, okay, well, here's one I shared last night that was received with lots of grumbles and eye rolls. I said to the family, we had all 5 kids home last night,
Wow.
and a couple extras. And I said, I came in and I said, oh, hey, whatever. And I said, oh, you know what, you guys, I've lost some weight by wearing bread on my head. What the heck? I said, yeah, it's a new loaf hat diet that I've been trying. Loaf hat diet.
Yes.
Not good at all. Huh?
Maybe we'll cut this out of the video.
Yeah, we probably should. Well, let's get to the important stuff.
Let's get to the important stuff here. So I'm going to share the screen here. And as we said here, we're going to talk about modern selling 101 and the basics of it. So, all right, so let's go through kind of what we're going to be talking about today real quickly, and then we'll jump into each of these areas. So we're going to start off with an area that we both talk a lot about, Brandon, is how modern buyers buy and what that really means.
The wonderful circle of trust.
A wonderful circle of trust.
That's right.
Then we're going to get into a definition that we've worked very hard in crafting. Hopefully it makes sense, but
yeah, I hope you all like it because we've got hours into this one, but I'm sure everybody will have some input and we'll tweak it. But I
believe every
good.
word in this definition has been changed like 5 times. So
probably.
And we'll talk about that. Then we've really take that and said, how do we put that into a framework? And so we've defined what we're calling the modern selling framework that we're going to work through, which has 3 parts. Talks about mindset, social prospecting, and buyer enablement. Those are the sort of 3 legs of the stool of the framework, which we'll get into. And then we have some accelerators that kind of enable that framework to kind of come to life.
And those accelerators, I think I'm excited for that. And I think that's something that people really need to understand, that the necessity of these accelerators, I believe.
Well, the accelerators really are the thing that really make that modern selling framework come to life, right? And not only come to life for yourself, but for your team, and to be able to do it at scale. So we'll get into all 3 of those. And then our favorite topic here is digital dominance. So how do we use all of this to really dominate in your area? We'll talk a bit about that, and then some next steps. Boy, we have a lot to cover. I thought this was going to be quick.
We do.
All right.
Yeah, let's get going.
We're going to have to go quick. So let's talk about our, Brandon, this is your area. So let's do it.
Yeah. Look, modern buyers buy differently. And I think one of the challenge is that I've seen is there's a lot of head shaking, Gartner and Accenture, and you get all the analyst data. Oh yeah, buyers are doing things differently. Buyers are going 70, 75, 80% of their research on their own before they reach out to sales professionals. I think there's a lot of head shaking, but the behavior isn't changing. And that is really important. So let's take a look at what modern buyers, how they buy. And I would encourage everybody to think about this is maybe take your selling hat off for a second and put on your hat as a buyer and put yourself in these shoes. So buyers, of course, are the center of their universe as we see here. And the way that they gather information is through people who they know, they like, they trust. They get it from trusted advisors, friends, colleagues, all these people that they allow into their world. And the channels that those people use it's from podcasts, it's from social posts, it's from articles. Maybe they share some case studies. There's videos like you're watching today. So maybe it's a YouTube channel or it's a podcast. But either way, as buyers, we all have the ability to accept and reject people into our lives. Meaning, when I get calls, if I don't recognize the number, I don't answer it. In fact, my phone will even tell me possible spam and I don't answer it. I have no obligation to return voicemails just because somebody called me. My spam filter is turned up really high because I really don't have the time to pay attention to any content that somebody emails me that I didn't ask for. So in other words, as buyers, we create our circle of trust. And then we've got all of these others on the outside, like vendors and sales reps and cold calls that are on the outside. And what we really do is we just kind of put our arms up and we push out the people and the information that we don't want. And we allow we subscribe, we follow them in social media, we see it in our news feeds. We allow people to influence us we want, and we keep out those that we don't want. So if you're a vendor or you're a sales professional or you're trying to capture buyers' attention, we start sending in all of these messages. Want to hit button on there for me, Tom? And all these messages are coming in, but they're met with this invisible but very, very powerful circle that buyers use to keep out unsolicited requests for information. So what that means is us as sellers, I'll click that button for me again. Oh yeah, I had built in there how the fortified the wall, and there's a few of those, but if you click it one more time, this is us as a salesperson. We're on the outside. And what we really need to do is figure out how do we get ourselves inside the circle of trust, and click that button for me, Tom. How we get ourselves welcomed inside the circle of trust. And if we already know that buyers ourselves, what we do is we subscribe, we unsubscribe, we follow, whatever it may be, and that's the way we allow people to influence us, then as sales professionals, we need to use content, we need to use shows, we need to use social posts, we need to use information to get ourselves welcomed into their circle of trust. Because if all we're doing is picking up and making cold calls and sending out cold emails, we're going to get met by that big wall that they put around themselves. And we're not going to get access into the buyer circle of trust, where we have the opportunity to build that rapport and relationship and ultimately sell them something.
Yeah, this is awesome. And if you really take that one step further, right, if you're doing B2B sales and you have multiple, stakeholders involved in the sales process, you need to get in not only to an individual, but you have to get in that circle of trust for the company. And but you may start with that individual, right? Multiple individuals, but you're going to start with that, getting in. We'll talk about this, but with an individual, but then that leads you getting into the circle of trust, potentially within the whole organization.
And this speaks to the quality and style of information that we share, right? Practically speaking, we send a message, and let's say we use Navigator InMail. And we sound like, you guys hear me say this on the show and other places, we have to change their filter of the way that they see us. If we smell like a sales rep, they're going to treat us like one, and they're going to stiff arm us and keep us out.
Yep.
But if the filter they see us is, oh, this person shares information, they talk about this, they talk about that, whatever it may be, then that filter is how they then want to invite us into their circle of trust. So we're really constantly looking at how does our behavior influence the way they perceive us.
Well, and I think you've set the stage, right? The little blue guy there with the hands like this, that's our modern seller. That's That's the modern seller that we want to be, because we want to be in there. So
Right.
I think we've set the stage. Let's talk about how you actually do that. If I can click the slide. All right. So let's take a second and start by defining what we mean by modern selling. And Brandon, I'm going to let you start with the first one here, because that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about as it relates to, some of the things you do with social prospecting.
Yeah, for sure. So this definition, there's a few parts to it, but it starts with modern selling starts with leveraging digital channels to build healthy connections with ideal prospects. And the key with this is, how do we build that healthy connection, which is what I was just saying before about how do we control or influence the filters in which they look at us. Again, buyers are so sensitive these days. If we look and smell like a sales rep, they're going to treat us accordingly, which is, nope, stay out. If I'm ready, I'll call you. If I need you, I'll call you. But if we're just, we just portray ourselves in that sales mode. Hey, I got something. Do you have 15 minutes? We get pushed. They're filters. They see us that way. They push us out. They don't connect. So the key here is, how do we use our digital channels like our LinkedIn account and our activities on LinkedIn to build a healthy connection?
Well, the healthy connection, really simple, is in that circle, right? Once you start to become in that circle, you have a healthy connection. You could have a connection, but you're still outside the circle. And maybe that's right. the simple way to look at it.
Yeah. Well, and the other piece with that, real quick, sorry, is that I define a healthy connection as somebody that I have a high probability that if I ask them for a conversation, that they would accept. And Carson, our co-host on Social Selling for Newbies, always talks about, he does everything he can to increase his probability of being successful. And being the number one social seller for that small company called Microsoft, I think Carson knows what he's doing. I borrowed that from him. It's always about increasing your probability. And so that's what a healthy connection is.
And that connection, and we'll talk more about this, isn't necessarily a connection so you can start talking business and sell. It's just willingness to have that conversation as a starting point. All right, so let's take the next part of this definition, which then provides the foundation to share relevant content in a strategic sequence that further strengthens trust. So just so this is clear, you build the healthy connection, that gives you a foundation. That gives you a place to start sharing relevant content in a sequence, not just, spray and pray and hope that somebody likes what you're doing, but it gives you a strategic guide or a way for them to then get that content in the right sequence, which then further strengthens trust. Kind of the next step of the process here, which then this empowers sellers to have a controlled messaging system. I'm going to stop right there. I really like this term, right? We know we worked on this a lot. This empowers sellers to have a controlled system. And I think a lot of times where we get a lot of pushback, Brandon, in this whole modern selling and buyers in control, well, it's like, well, then if I lost all control, what do I do? Just cross my fingers and hope that somebody sends me orders? No. What you do is you empower this is empowering you to actually facilitate that journey.
Yeah, I think this is so important and you just touched on it, is I've talked to sales leaders and salespeople over the last several years. And for those that know, and I had my shirts that said social selling sucks. It was because I wanted to capture attention. So many people said, yeah, I tried it, didn't work. But what didn't work was the fact that we didn't have control. It was like, I published a bunch of things on LinkedIn and I didn't get a bunch of POs. This whole thing doesn't work. But what we're talking about is, how do we empower a seller to have a strategic plan that says, we're going to share this piece of content and then this piece of content and this piece of content, and all this content builds upon each other, and it caters to the buyer's desire to do their own research on their own terms. So instead of us going, do you have 30 minutes for a demo, which we know is a horrible question to ask these days. But if we built a healthy connection, we have a high probability that they'll engage with us, and then we're dripping information to them, whether it's on text or email or in a direct message, like, hey, Tom, as a CEO of LeadSmart and da da da, I thought you'd find this piece of content really valuable. Here's why.
Yep.
And do that in a succession of pieces that build on top of each other, that when you look at it from a 30,000 foot view, all these pieces of content tell your story.
Yep.
Your value proposition is educating them, but the buyer feels that they've done the research on their own.
Yep. And I think that's the next part, right? It enables the buyers to research on their own terms, but at the same time allows you to start generating demand for your product or service, which is the perfect world, right? I really do believe this is the perfect balance right here, is as a salesperson, quote unquote, you want to build that trusted advisor relationship, but at the same time, you want to give the power to the buyer to do their own research and feel like they're in control. And we're kind of both in control, but helping each other. And we're obviously going to get into much more detail about how you do this and some of the things going forward. But the goal is to ultimately create demand and then to do this repeatably, right? So the ultimate outcome is a repeatable process that creates new customers and establishes a predictable growth model at scale, because you want to be able to do this over and over and over. I don't know. I think this is a pretty good definition. Since we changed every word like 5 times, I think it's really good.
Yeah. And I think,
go ahead.
No, go ahead, Tom.
Well, I was going to just say one thing somebody may go is, well, how is this different than social selling? You know, you guys talk about social selling on your, you know what? Social selling and modern selling, we've learned, Brandon, is pretty much synonymous. It's the same in digital channels. We start with leveraging digital channels, as we said here, right? So social selling and modern selling to me is becoming one and the same. Some people, the word social selling, we're just trying to give a broader view of it when we talk about the modern selling aspect of it.
Yeah. And for me, I think that, you know, where social comes in versus say email or text messaging or other things, where social comes in is really at the beginning, especially to develop and create that healthy connection with your ideal prospects. Social is just an amazing opportunity for that. Unlike email or texting or calls, where it's outbound and can I get your time? With social, we can actually demonstrate our value, right? And we can be strategic with our activities so that we can go from being this cold and unknown person to being a warm, familiar person before we ask for a connection request. And we can do that through our comments, and we can do that through our publishing of posts, that they're actually reading and learning about us before we ever ask for something. And we get into that later about deposits versus, you know, debits versus withdrawals. But we can do that later. I get so excited. Let's move on, Tom.
Yeah, we can't make this a 4-hour thing, so we're going to have to move along. So
we could make it a 4-hour thing. That's the problem. We shouldn't make it a 4-hour thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. So how do we do this? This is the next step, right? We have a definition. We know what we're trying to accomplish, but how do we go about doing this? So what we've defined here is what we're calling the modern selling framework, which is composed of 3 interrelated parts, hence the 3 circles that are on top of each other here. And it really starts, you know, we've talked a lot about this on the show over and over and over with Carson and everything and our guests. It all starts with mindset. And then we then go into prospecting, the social prospecting, which is, Brandon, your predominant area of expertise and background, and then buyer enablement, which is what my whole book, The Revenue Zone, is all about. So we then kind of use that to dovetail into each of those areas.
Which for everybody watching, you understand that Tom and I were friends before, but as I was developing out my social prospecting program over the last 3-4 years, Tom was doing his research and wrote his book on the revenue zone. When he shared the book with me, I was like, oh my gosh, Tom, this is the Tom, you complete me, right? It was this perfect 1-2 punch. And as we kept talking and sharing with each other, that's where, you know, I said, Tom, come be a part of my show and change it into our show. And Digital Influence Show became Social Selling for Newbies. Of course, we invited Carson in, but this fits so well together that it was just so natural for Tom and I to come together and start building this out as a unit.
Yep. And we're going to get into more detail on these circles here in a minute. But before we do that, let's go to our modern mindset top 10 list. Because
yes, I
again,
like it.
We talk a lot about, and these aren't in any order, right? We struggle to go, well, what order do we put these in? So it's not like any one of these is more important than the other, but these are the top 10 sort of mindset, modern mindset things that you need to be thinking about for all of this to work. If
I hope
not there, it doesn't work.
Right. And I hope David Letterman's proud of us that we did our top 10 list for, at least those of us on the older end that remember him. I spent a lot of time watching David Letterman.
Yeah, I wish I had some of those cards I could just throw over.
I know, you start throwing cards.
Right.
Yeah. All right, let's get into it.
All right. Well, number one, God, slides are, okay, there we go. We've talked about this. We won't spend a lot of time on it. The buyer is in control of their buyer journey. We have to accept that. If we don't accept that, a lot of things fall apart pretty quickly.
And I think it's important, and the reason we added it on here, and you can put number 2 on there too, Tom, at the same time, because like I was saying before, we say, oh yeah, the buyer controls their buyer journey, but do you really believe it? Because if you do believe it, then your behavior changes. If you just give it lip service, then your behavior doesn't change. And we're going to keep pounding the phones, or keep sending emails because we think that we're in control, or somehow we're going to get control back. And I just think that time is come and gone. And experience tells me it's come and gone.
Yeah. And it's certainly, it might happen every once in a while, but it's certainly not going to be a part of a successful strategy, right? To make that. So as a seller, you cannot control the buyer journey, as we just said, but you can influence it, which what we just talked about earlier. So that's the plus side. Mm-hmm. Number 3, buyers welcome guidance and assistance. This is something where, the Gartner thing, if you really start to peel back that Gartner article that you mentioned earlier, Brandon, about people not wanting to deal with salespeople. If you really start peeling that back, what they don't want to deal with is they don't want to get sales. They don't want to get sold. Mm-hmm. What they're willing, however, if somebody is providing guidance and assistance and they're doing it on their own terms and schedule, they will welcome them, or at least have the opportunity to be welcome and have the opportunity to potentially get in that circle of trust.
And that's when we talk about the filters in which they look at you, right? If you behave like a very strong salesperson, their filter is you're in sales, you're trying to sell me something, and they'll keep you out. But if their filter is, hey, you're an influential voice in the space, you share interesting information, I've read a few things that you've posted on LinkedIn that were intriguing, I see you comment on other people's posts that I also follow, then the lens is more of you're in their network, you share information. It is really, really important that we manage our activity to make sure that we can influence that filter, because as soon as we are seen as a salesperson, we're treated as one. And it's not pretty these days.
And they don't welcome, even if I have something really valuable to offer, they're not going to welcome me because they're thinking of me as a salesperson and not a trusted advisor. Yeah. All right, Brandon, this is one of your biggest mantras right here.
Yeah, look, we've got to change that mindset that we have to earn the conversation instead of get the conversation. And what this speaks to is our behavior. Do we call in demand? Do we call in bug? I finally got the conversation after 8 tries of calling. They finally accepted my call. You know what? If that's the case, they probably accepted it to get you off their case, get you off their list, and get you out of their way. So we need to earn it. We need to use our activity, our behavior, the content we share, the commenting that we do to earn the right for them to say, I want to have a conversation with you.
Again, mindset, right? We're talking about mindset. If I'm looking at the things that I'm doing is to earn that conversation versus get it, it's going to change how I go about some of the things that we're going to talk about here as we go forward. Here's another one that I think this one maybe even belong more to Carson than any of us, but your job is to serve, not sell. And I think that ties very closely into number 4, right? Is that you're earning the right to the conversation by serving versus selling something. You'll sell something if you get invited to the conversation.
Right. And buyers, they want to be served. They want to be supported. They want to be helped. They want to have good conversations. but they don't want to be sold. So if our mindset in a conversation is how do I serve you, they're going to engage that conversation a lot better. And when they're looking for that trusted advisor, you've established yourself as a trusted advisor because you've given trusted advice.
Yep. All right. We've got through 5. Now we're getting to the next 5. Seller's goal, as we've talked about, is to be viewed as a trusted advisor and guide by the buyer. So the reason this is a mindset item as a seller, right? My goal is to be viewed as a trusted advisor and a guide. If I've accomplished that, I'm in the circle, right? I'm in that circle of trust. If I'm not viewed as that, I'm outside the circle of trust. That's a huge, huge, huge goal and a huge, huge objective. And remember, even Carson, I think, talked about when he does his sales meetings, he's now talking to them about, tell me how many places are you now viewed as the trusted guide and advisor, right? That's almost a key metric in their sales team, is how well they're getting in that circle of trust.
Right.
All right. Should we move on?
Yes.
Okay. This is one that's a bit controversial, but I think we're seeing it play out more and more all the time, which is the buying experience, hence the experience that your buyer goes through, is more important than your product, service, or brand. And we see this all the time, Brandon, with people we talk to, is they may have an awesome product, maybe a great brand, lots of whatever, references, all of that. But then they do a crappy buying experience. They never get in the circle of trust, and they never get an opportunity to even showcase their product or service or brand.
Yeah.
So the buying experience every day is becoming more and more important. This is a big mindset shift, right? From, hey, I got my product, or, look at all my stuff, or look at my great features, or all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it goes back to number 5, which was earn the conversation versus get, right? Their buying experience, if you're sharing information, you're sharing stuff, they go, oh, wow, that's interesting, or anything like that, you're going to earn conversations. But if you're knocking and pounding on doors and making lots of calls to get the conversation, that buying experience is going to be such that they don't really care about your product or service at that point. And unless you're the only one in a community and you're the only place that they can get it, obviously, but there's just far and few between companies that live in that world anymore.
Well, I do believe your brand will ultimately be defined by the experience that you provide, buying and otherwise.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Here's a good one for you.
Healthy connections and relationships are the foundation of a successful sales model. Look, we've heard lots of things around the term relationship selling, and you may think that relationship selling is dead or dying, but relationships in selling are more important now than ever. Because if you don't have that relational equity, you're not getting further down the sales cycle at all. So having that healthy connection, you can call it a relationship, that's the key to getting further down any sort of conversation with a prospective buyer.
Yep. This is a funny one. Digital channels are accelerators, not magic bullets. So we see this a lot. It's like, well, I can go on LinkedIn and I can reach somebody on LinkedIn and then, ask them to buy my stuff, and that's just going to magically happen. And no, digital channels are accelerators. You can cover a lot more ground digitally than you can in a car or even making phone calls, but there's nothing magic about them. They're just a channel.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had a couple of conversations this past week where I just very impassionately said, look, sales is still hard. It's always going to be hard. Sure. And maybe it even gets harder. The mindset of, social media was supposed to be this quick fix. That's what failed you. The mindset that it was a silver bullet or some sort of a magic wand, that's what failed you. Digital accelerates because there's so many opportunities and so many people that we can connect with. But if we're trying to just beat people over the head and sell them something, it's not going to work. It's not a magic bullet.
No. Which brings us to
number 10.
Number 10.
That's my favorite.
We've gone so slow so far.
Yeah, look, I think that so often in sales, we want the quick win. And I get it. I've been a sales guy my whole life, basically, right? We want the quick win. We want to get in, we want to be successful and get out. And that's from our perspective. From the buyer's perspective, it's not the way that they want to operate. They want to do the research on their own time, which means we have to be patient. We have to go through the slower process of providing the right content in the right order and let them facilitate their buying experience and be a guide. But if we try to come in and move too quick, we get our butts kicked out of the circle of trust and then we're not successful. So going slow piles up a lot more wins than trying to go fast and failures.
Yeah. And your probability goes much higher. Your results, the number percentage goes much higher. I mean, everything else starts to feel a lot better, right? Who wants to go, bat 1 for 100? All right. So these are our top 10 mindset items to, again, if you can get these sort of in your head, then the other two things that we're just going to talk about now, social prospecting and buyer enablement, makes sense. If these are
absolutely,
if you're in disagreement or these, whatever, the next things we're going to talk about are going to be more difficult to work with because you're going to try and go back to the old way of thinking. Hence why we really consider this the core of the framework.
Right.
Should we move ahead?
Let's do it. Because I think these, social prospecting is just taking somebody who you are unknown to and turning that into a healthy connection. Now, when we're talking about LinkedIn, there's 3 types of connections, in my opinion. There's no connection. You're not literally connected on LinkedIn. The second one could be you're connected. You have that LinkedIn connection, but you may not know them. They don't know you. You haven't talked for a long period of time. And then you have healthy connections. And a healthy connection is one where you have a high probability that if you ask for a call, they would give it to you. So social prospecting is about how do we leverage our own social activities to move ourselves from being cold and unknown to being warm and recognized, to being a solid connection where we have a high probability that if we sent them a message after being connected to them and said, hey, would you be open to getting on a call, that they would do it. That's what social prospecting is.
Again, the outcome is that healthy connection. And then once you have that healthy connection, right, the other circle here, buyer enablement, this is a lot of where the concepts of in my book, The Revenue Zone, is how do you then take that healthy connection, move, create more trust, build demand, so they get to the point where they're seriously considering doing business with you, right? Now, I haven't said bought anything because there's other things like contracts and all those types of things. But our goal here in buyer enablement is to get them to the point where they are seriously considering doing business with you and your company, which is what we all want, right? Isn't that what we all want, is to get people or get prospects to that point? So, but as we talked about earlier, we have to enable them. We're not going to force them there. We're not going to drag them along up to that point where they're willing to do business with us. We have to enable them to do business with that. And we do that by being that guide in that picture there of taking them through the process of getting from here to there. Yeah. Looks just like me. It's great. So
let's move to social prospecting.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So this is a social prospecting framework that I've created over the last several years through trial and error. And like this came about because I started looking at what did we do before the internet? Like, how did we get introduced to people? How did we introduce ourselves to people? And I'm going to go through this quickly, but hear me out a little bit. At a networking event, so you're at a conference, you're at, the night before, people are having cocktails, whatever it may be. We walk in that room and what do? We look around and we identify people. Either we recognize them or we look at their name badge and we kind of go, oh, I want to get to know them. And what do is we move over to their geographical area where they are. And maybe there's a group of people talking in a circle. And we kind of go get close to the circle and we start to listen to the conversation. And when there's an opportunity for us to say something that contributes to the conversation, we do. And if it's accepted, right, we're not rude, we're not charging in, we're not trying to dominate the conversation or something, then the circle kind of opens up and people let you in. And now all of a sudden you're in the conversation. And then at some point you're able to go, oh, hey, Tom, my name's Brandon Lee. Nice to meet you. And you shake hands. And now you have a healthy connection. It's just the beginning, but now you are connected and in an opportunity to have a conversation with that person. So if that resonates with you, this framework is what me and a bunch of clients have created over the last several years in looking at how do we do this in an accelerated way by using LinkedIn. And so what it is we are not connected to people, and our option is we go send them a cold connection request. And again, the filter, when we get cold connection requests, the filter is what? Salesperson, right? That's why
my filter is I sit there for like, should I do it? Should I do it? Should I connect? And then, right. And then sometimes I know I almost do it for fun. It's like, okay, how fast is it going to be before the slap comes, the pitch slap coming back? Right.
Yeah.
Not a healthy connection. It's almost a joke connection, you know?
Right. Exactly. And so the social prospecting framework does this. We can control our behavior in LinkedIn. And by controlling our behavior, we can ensure that people get notifications and see that we've commented and liked on posts that they've previously liked, commented, or maybe even published. So we move ourselves from being this cold and unknown person to being warm and recognized before we send the connection request. And we do that with our engagement activity. So what it looks like is we go to their post or their post activity, because LinkedIn notifications work the same way. So if I wanted to get Tom's attention and I didn't know him, I can go look at everything that he posts. And if he doesn't post a lot, I could look at all the posts that he's engaged with, everything he's liked or commented on. And if I come behind him and I comment on something that he's previously liked, then LinkedIn will send him a notification and say, Brandon Lee, show him my picture, commented on a post that you liked. I mean, everybody's seen those, right? You get them in emails, you get them on your LinkedIn notification, but starts to put people in front of you that you don't know. So we can control our behavior to do that, our activity to do that. And the model is do this 4 times. You can wait 2, 3 days, 4 days in between, but you do this 4 times and then you send the connection request. And what we saw immediately by doing this was like 100% plus increase in accepted connection requests. Why? We're not cold anymore. Right. We're controlling that filter. Right. They see us as somebody that's in their network, that's a positive, active person in their network through comments and other things. And who doesn't want to connect with someone like that? So we use our behavior. We send the connection request. We can craft the message really well too. Hey, Tom, it seems like you and I comment on a lot of the same posts. We remind them, you've seen me. I'm a part of your community. I went to your profile and noticed that we're not connected. Is it okay if we connect? Send that connection request. When you get it accepted, you thank them. A lot of times what I do, I'll do an audio off my LinkedIn app and I'll send them an audio thank you. Just say, hey, Tom, thanks so much for accepting my request. I'll see you more online. Have an awesome day. That's it. I want to control the filter. I want them to like me. I want them to trust me. I want them to want to talk to me. I don't want to scare them off by going, okay, let's go. I got to sell you something, right? Then we go engage again. We pop back up in their notification radar one more time. And then we politely ask for a call. And again, the way that we craft it, hey, Tom, I saw you again. You and I both commented on Carson's post. That was really cool. What he said, blah, 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 whatever. No, I was wondering, would you be open to getting in a conversation? Would you be open to having a Zoom? Would you be open to having a call and for us to get to know each other? Now, for me, that is not a sales call. For me, that is the last step of prospecting and establishing a healthy relationship. So for me, that call is just all about human to human, getting to know each other, ask them a lot of questions That's where I pull out my history of how to win friends and how to win friends and influence people training. And I just am all about them and establish a really strong relationship with them. That for me is a social prospecting framework, and how I move people from being cold and or from me being cold and unknown to being a healthy connection who they appreciate, know, like, and trust.
Well, I think that's a great overview. Obviously, there's a lot more to it and a lot more details that you go through and classes and different stuff on that. But I think it sets the stage. I do want to say one thing because it may be going through somebody's mind. Well, my prospects aren't on LinkedIn, or they're not active on LinkedIn, or whatever. We hear it all the time. Actually,
we have a show for that.
Go listen to Social Selling for Newbies episode number 24, where we talk about that exact thing. In fact, we'll make sure that we include that in the link in this program when we see it, so you can go back and take a look at that. Because, but the framework that you're talking about still fits, right? It may be going about it a little bit different, but even when we talked about in the show, it still fits, and there's some different strategies for doing that.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Let's go to the other half of the equation here, which is buyer enablement, right?
And that's yours.
That's mine. So once I've got the healthy connection, right? Once I've got this little guy over here is the healthy connection. And there's that person now has some knowledge of who I am and maybe who my company is. And they probably have some awareness of what I do, or even the products or services I sell, right? But there's some level. Maybe in your phone call, it moved up a bit higher. Maybe in the phone call, the person or the healthy connection learned more about you or learned more about your products. So they may start somewhere in this kind of area right here. But they're certainly not in the place where they're what I call in the revenue zone, which is they're seriously considering doing business with you or your company. So our job now, assuming that there is some qualification here and that this person is a valid prospect, is to create demand around our product or service while at the same time continuing to build trust. And as we said earlier, right, this isn't about spray and pray and send them a bunch of content and brochures and things like that and hope that magically they sort of end up from here to over here. What we want to do is we want to send them down an intelligent sequential set of content that's provided at the right time in the right sequence, but it's done in a way that they feel like they are in control of that journey. They're doing their own research, and it's step by step, and it's not quite a straight line, but it may be a bit of a windy road rather than a straight road. But through that, you're going to ultimately end up in the revenue zone. And that road, I call the yellow brick road in my book, right? How do we construct that yellow brick road for our business that is going to move those healthy connections and those prospects from here to there? And that's what buyer enablement is we're enabling the buyer to make that journey. We're not forcing the guy, we're not pulling him along and, harassing him to get there. We're enabling that journey so that they get there, and that demand has been created, the trust has been built. And now I have a super high probability of turning that into a customer, into a sale, and into revenue. And that's how our two systems of social prospecting and buyer enablement work together. And there's obviously going to be more, and you'll see it in the community, but the purpose here was to kind of show those things. Brandon, anything before we move on this one?
Yeah, I think, my natural flow, what I do with my social prospecting and outreaching and developing those first conversations. If you look at the little guy on the revenue zone matrix there, I tend to end up being down to the bottom right through my initial social prospecting activity. Like, they know me, they like me, and they even start to trust me because of the content that I share, the way that I've engaged them, the way that I've had a conversation with them. I didn't sell in the first conversation. I tend to move down that way. But then the real challenge for me is, well, how do I get them now to the top right corner? And when I first started doing this, I did really good at that early part. And then I'd wait a few days and I'd come back and go, hey, Tom, after we talked the other day, I was thinking, I got da-da-da, would you be interested in talking? And I just would lose credibility because all of a sudden I gave them the filter of me as a sales rep, and then they ghost. And they said, push away, move on, whatever. So when I saw Tom's book and read it in the Yellow Brick Road, I just pestered him for a while. with a bunch of questions and comments because I saw that as what completed the piece. Social prospecting was working really, really well, but I didn't have a tool that took it to the next level. And that's where everything here with buyer enablement that Tom put together comes into play.
I think that's a great point with the social prospecting, right? You're most likely going to start your journey here, probably farther down on the horizontal axis here. And you may even be a little bit higher up on here too. But the mistake, and you said, right, the mistake is then we try and jump and go right to this point where we think they're in the revenue zone and we want to start telling about our products and all of that. And yet we haven't enabled them to get to the point where they even care about what we do and how we do it. So yeah, you're exactly right. And that's what the Yellow Brick Road helps enable is, okay, it's great that you built the relationship, but now how do you do that in a way to facilitate that journey and to do it at scale? And that's how the three pieces fit together as it relates to mindset first, social prospecting, and buyer enablement. All right.
And this next
time. Yeah, go ahead.
This next slide for everybody is really where this all comes together and gets a lot of fun with the accelerators. Tom, why don't you share about the accelerators?
Well, obviously, right, we want to create a flywheel, if you will. We want to create and be able to do this over and over and over at scale, whether I'm an individual or a team, I'm leading a team or whatever the case may be, right? We want this to be a system. And so what we looked at, what Brandon and I both looked at is, what have we found to be successful to really drive this flywheel? And we ended up coming up with three things. One is what we call episodic content, which we'll talk about in just a minute. It's a special type of content. Then leading into having the right sales playbooks so that we're building our playbooks around the things that we just talked about here. And then leveraging technology to further accelerate and further scale what we're doing. And then all of this starts to become and really turn. And again, whether if you're an individual doing this or you're a team doing this, if you put these things in motion, what can really start to generate is pretty miraculous. And that's why we call them accelerators.
Yeah. And as we go through these and we'll talk about episodic content, I want everyone to know is that as Tom and I over the last year were doing our show and looking at our products, looking at our services together and all the stuff that we were envisioning, these pieces all started coming together. Like we didn't come out and go, oh, let's go do this. Over time, what we realized is like, oh my gosh, this is influencing this, and then this is influencing this. And that's how this framework was built. And I believe at the core of it is episodic content now. And I've even gotten to the point, and Tom, I think you've gotten there too, where I just tell everybody, if you don't have episodic content, you're dumb. I don't know any way to say it. Like,
well, let's talk about that. Yeah, let's talk about episodic content. So
yeah, you're missing out. I mean, it's like running a race without a leg.
Yep.
Without it.
So what do we mean by episodic, right? People are like, what is that? Is it a disease or something? What is it? What are you talking about here? So episodic means, like episode, right, is containing or consisting of a series of loosely connected parts or events. So if you watch something on Netflix and it has 10 episodes, right, each episode tends to connect to the other one. There's some relationship to it and so forth. If you listen to a podcast, if you listen to ours, hopefully there is some sort of loosely connected parts or events as we go from one to the other. If nothing else, dad jokes and movies. But either way, we have a connected set of events that move things forward. So it's a series, I think, is super important. It's a series of content or a series of parts that come together. So some examples of that would be a live show, right? We do a live show every Wednesday, Social Selling for Newbies. I do another live show with my software company. And every week we have an episode. It has a topic. They're loosely connected. It creates a lot of great content and it builds over and over in time.
And the key there is it creates a lot of great content, right? And if buyers need to control their journey and we need to help facilitate that by providing information in front of them, we need to provide information for them that helps them think, helps them understand new things without selling them. And episodes are a great way to be able to do that. So whether it's a live show or it's your podcast, or like I know Carson does a lot of webinar series with Microsoft, but some sort of ongoing content based around a theme, it really empowers the system. It empowers the sales playbook. It gives great content for salespeople to share that's being aware of the filter, right? Hey, let me give this to you. Let me give this to you. I thought you would find it valuable. I thought you'd find it valuable for this reason. And we're giving and giving and giving and giving, and we're not asking for anything. Your episodic content just completely fills those buckets and allows your salespeople to behave that way.
Well, and when you base your content, right, what your themes are and what you're talking about around the social prospecting and the buyer enablement that we just went through, the yellow brick road, these episodes or this content can create a tremendous amount of demand very quickly. And again, it's the customer is guiding their journey, or the prospect is guiding their journey through it. You're just providing the data, you're serving, you're doing a lot of things we talked about in the mindset piece. But it's very hard to do that in one hour webinar or one explainer video or whatever. When you do this week in and week out or whatever your sequence is, it starts to build on each other. And then we've seen this. This isn't just, making this up. We see what can be created by doing it. And, there's probably a ton of questions about how you do this. That's not what we want to get into here. It's not as hard as you think, but you said, it's like, to me, it's essential to drive that flywheel, because otherwise it's just too hard, right? It's just too hard to try and keep up.
Yeah. And I have two meetings next week that came from two messages I got last week, which were basically people messaged me on LinkedIn, acted like we were buddies, but the tone of it, the feel of it, right? Like we were old friends.
You were already a healthy connection.
Right. And I really didn't know who they were. We were connected, and it was, hey, Brandon, been paying attention to your content for about a year now. Love the show. My company, we're going through this. I think you can help us. When can we talk? Right? They went through a yellow brick road. I was feeding them content. I didn't even know I was feeding them the content, but it was happening through our episodic content, also with my social post, with my commenting, but all of that content nurtured them, and I had no idea what was going on. That's why I think episodic content is so important.
And invisibly, they ended up moving up the revenues, or up the yellow brick road to the revenue zone. Maybe they're not in quite demand, but maybe they're in strong interest, and there's definitely a level of trust. So you've basically leapfrogged, or you've jumped way up in that upper right-hand corner just by the fact of having the episodic content that's there.
Right. And that's where we talk about having that system, right, that's going. Some you're going to be very intentional with feeding content to. Some are going to follow your content just because you're producing it all the time. That's where your episodic content comes in. But either way, what happens is you start backfilling this really large pipeline of people who you're creating demand, you're developing their demand through your content and all of your sharing of that content.
All right. So that's the first accelerator. The next accelerator is taking all of this and putting it into some form of a sales playbook. And we've built a couple of these now that are aligned to the whole social prospecting and buyer enablement yellow brick road. And the reason you want to have that playbook is you want to be able to, for yourself, have follow a guide, but now this allows you to repeat it in an organization. So it provides a common way for your organization to follow the prospecting and the yellow brick road and the content and everything that's there. And it also gives that step-by-step guidance that, everybody wants. I'm
sorry, Tom, go ahead.
No, go ahead, jump in.
I was saying this just supports my two favorite words, strategies and systems. Yes. Right? Your sales playbook takes everything we've talked about in the mindset. If we believe this to be true, it's going to change our behavior. We do social prospecting, we do buyer enablement. How do we do this in a systematic way to make sure that we're being consistent? And that's where our playbooks come in.
Yep. So they do include, messaging, examples, and then any training that happens right now happens around this playbook. So you have a common, as you said, strategy and system that now can be repeated either for yourself or for others to repeat over and over and over. So this is the second accelerator that, really gets things going. Again, and if you can leverage that with your episodic content, right, now you're really in a place where you can go to the third accelerator, which is technology. And obviously we could talk a lot about technology, but we've seen three things, Brandon, that we see, I think, are essential technologies, right, that you want to be thinking about. Let's start off with the playbook and process automation. Let's talk through that a bit.
Yeah, I think with the playbook and process automation it's about efficiency, right? How do we empower our sales teams to be efficient with their time, do the right activities with the right people at the right time in the right sequence or cadence? And there's a lot of technology out there to do it. And look, if you're watching this, you know that Tom and I both own technology companies and all that. And this isn't about us pushing our technology by any means. Obviously, yes, we love it when people buy our technology, bonus. But your technology, I think there's stacks have gotten so convoluted, and there's so many tools, and teams are just overwhelmed with this tool and that tool and this tool. I think when the mindset is changed about how we're engaging with people, the tech stack also gets a lot smaller, because we're not looking for AI to tell us that somebody might have thought about buying our product and then we go swarm them like roadkill type of thing. This is really using our activities to develop relationships like we've always done, just in a digital based environment like social media.
It does simplify a lot, because you're doing just what we talked about. You're prospecting, building healthy connections, and then enabling that buyer to hopefully move into the revenue zone. What you want to do is be able to automate some of the logistics of that for yourself so you can do it faster and more efficiently. You want to be able to track it, and you want to know as much as possible, is it working? Right. And that's the simplicity of it. A lot of the other stuff, like you said, Brandon, all these intent-based things, and I'm tracking this, and all of that is, I guess they have their place in some places, but really for the framework of this, it's a lot simpler. Do I have a way of tracking what I'm doing? Do I have a way of organizing and streamlining what I'm doing? And do I have some reporting and analytics to tell me how well I'm doing? That's really the simplistic of it. All right. Well, let's move ahead here. So really, hopefully now you have a good idea of what is the framework, which are the three circles here, starting with the mindset, social prospecting, buyer enablement, and then the accelerators that make this more detailed. Now, by no means are we expecting you to be an expert on any of this based on what this is 101. If you remember in the beginning of the thing here, we'll be covering a lot more of this in a lot more detail. But everything, even in the community here, Modern Seller HQ, everything that we do will probably end up tying back to something in this picture. Right. Yep. And if it's not, then we better kick ourselves in the butt and say, what are we doing? Because it should tie back to everything in the picture here.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's talk about digital dominance.
Yeah.
Digital dominance.
Before we wrap up here, that we've saved.
Yeah, and we'll wrap it up. Yeah, and look, digital dominance is a term that I love. It sounds good. It's alliteration and all that. But what the heck does it mean, Brandon, besides you getting all excited? Like when we can take this three-dimensional look at your businesses, from a corporate standpoint, a team standpoint, an individual standpoint, from the different divisions within your organization, we take a look at the industry. If we have a team of people that is operating from this mindset with digital prospecting activities and buyer enablement, we digitally dominate our industry. This is a game changer for organizations, because we've completely aligned our corporate behavior and individual behavior with the way buyers choose to do their research. And when those two come together, you're just going to digitally dominate your industry. And that's why this excites me so much. And so much of what we've seen with some of our clients, and even with our own activities, it's fun. It's been really fun. And I look forward to the rest of the 2020s with this as our playbook, where I know a lot of people are looking at the rest of the 2020s with a lot of dread, because their outreach activities or sales activities have not been nearly as fruitful as they've been in the years past.
And the way that we look at this, right, is kind of a crawl, walk, run, is looking at, okay, how can you apply this? Maybe you're going to start it at an individual level and maybe certain industry or certain products or certain things, and then certain areas within the company. And then it moves up to be a team or a corporate. So all of this can be scalable. That's what we're really talking about, leading to that digital dominance. But you got to start somewhere and start small, start, crawl, walk, run. And then eventually, as you said, you can really dominate. And we've seen that over and over.
So what's next, Tom?
I don't know. It's just blank. What is
Yeah, look at that. Next steps.
Nothing.
Like a game show.
Yeah. So,
and now what did they win, Tom?
Yeah. So I think, what are the next steps if you're watching this? Obviously, come in the community and participate as you can. Be active. The community is growing all the time. We're getting some really great feedback. We just had a show this morning, Brandon, our live get together this morning. Had some really great feedback from people and a lot of people learning from each other. So including the live events and the training sessions. And please invite your peers and colleagues. Right? We want people that are trying to make this really become that modern seller and are adopting the mindset. And let's face it, right? There's challenges with this. There's barriers. There's things we're going to run into. Hell, you and I run into these things all the time, right? We're by no means perfect modern sellers. So invite your peers and your colleagues, and the more the merrier, into the community. Getting into the community is free. Brandon, you have a pretty cool class coming out, right? Called the Social Prospecting Masterclass.
We sure do. And yeah, in fact, I've just got to get it done. We keep learning so much more in the community. I keep going to tweak things and change things. But we'll get that finished up over the next couple of weeks and get that put in there.
And depending upon when you're watching this video, it may be there.
May already be. Right. Yeah, that's for sure.
And so the Social Prospecting Masterclass really goes into detail on the green circle of social prospecting. There's also a program called the Revenue Zone Jumpstarter program that's in this community right now. It's there right now. It's something I built around the book and the Yellow Brick Road. Goes into a lot more detail, 20 some videos, really allows you to become much more of an expert in that part of the equation. And then I can't stress this enough, start testing and implementing in your organization. And you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater if you're not convinced or you don't think this is going to work or whatever the case may be. Just try it. Try some of this and start to see the results for yourself. And then share that in the community, come back in the community and get help. That's what we're here to do.
Yep. Share what worked, share what didn't work, share where you got frustrated, share where you had a success. Yep. I have been, the modernsellerhq.com community has been amazing over the last several months, and the feedback, the insights, the learning that we've been doing. When you try something, come back to the community and share it, and you'll be surprised at how much more you learn and accelerate your own learning curve.
Yep. And if you need more help, coaching, guidance, just reach out to us. You can find both Brandon and I on LinkedIn. You can find us in the community. Reach out. Happy to have a call. We won't pitch slap you. We won't do any of that stuff. We just will have a conversation and see if there's a way that we can help. And coming soon. I don't know how soon. Well, it depends upon when you're watching this video. But one of the things we're really looking at, by request, honestly, is how to really make this modern seller more of a certification and something I can put on my resume, and others would recognize that they've gone through this and sort of have the skills, because this is the future, right? As you start to hire people, you're going to want people that have that modern selling mentality, that modern seller mindset, and have some of the tricks and the capabilities that we have here. So we eventually see this going into a certification, but we're still crawling. We're not quite there yet, but we'll get there soon, hopefully this year.
Yeah. So everybody, thanks so much for going through this with us. And we know it's a little bit of a long event for you to sit through and go through. And we don't normally like doing things this long. We just felt like going through within an hour was really important to take this thing soup to nuts and be able to cast vision, share with you what's been happening, what's been working, and give you a taste of it and see, as Tom said on this next steps, if the next right step, go to modernsellerhq.com, join the community, start poking around, read what other people are sharing and talking about, ask some questions, and then go from there. And as Tom said, if we can be of any help, reach out to us. We're obviously in the community. You can chat with us there. You can hit us up on LinkedIn, whatever you need to do. But we do have that modern seller mindset. We come to serve. We look to help. And we know that in the process of doing that, that we are growing our companies. We're serving lots of people. We're providing for our families. But it all comes from a heart of serving and really trying to help people solve their problems. And the fruit of that ends up being more and more customers that want to sign contracts with us. And we want the same thing for you and your company as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm actually pretty impressed that we did all of this in an hour and 6 minutes or roughly whatever this is here. So that was a lot of ground to cover again. Yeah, thank you, like Brandon said, for listening. And we definitely look forward to meeting you and seeing you in the community and learning more about your modern seller journey.